At long last, Pixar's latest feature film, Elio, has been released, and it does feel like it's been a long time coming. It was way back in 2022 that we first heard about this film at D23, and from then on I kind of mostly expected radio silence until we got the run of trailers that would precede its release by 9 months or so, like most films. We had a director that I think a lot of Pixar fans would have had a lot of faith in, considering he was the co-director of Coco, which was a big hit, and was well received by both critics and audiences, and really, everything was looking up. Then things started to go somewhat off the rails for the movie. The first teaser came out way back in June 2023. Yes, June 2023, 2 years before the film would eventually release. Obviously, it wasn't always scheduled to have such a long gap between the first look and its debut, having originally been slated for March 2024, but in the end, the big Hollywood strikes as well as the leadership overhaul in the movie resulted in its delays to 2025. At the same time as learning about the delay, we learned that we were also changing up directors, with the original director leaving the project and eventually being announced to have moved off to Coco 2, whilst the director for Turning Red and then a storyboard artist who'd been working on the movie previously were chosen to step up to complete the film. I do wonder what happened here. Did they all realise at the same time that this movie wasn't going to be the big hit they were hoping for, and so they shuffled him off to Coco 2 because that's a higher priority for the studio, and he already had that proven track record with Coco 1? Was his vision for the film not working and hence they all decided it'd be best to go in a different direction? Did they just decide that with the delays from the strikes it'd be better if he goes off and works on Coco so that doesn't get delayed in turn, and they don't have to go in a different creative direction with that film? I'm honestly really curious. On top of that, I do wonder what the differences between the two films would be. Apparently enough of his original work survived the transition that they kept his name as a co-director of the project, but are there some key differences too? That's probably something that's going to come out in interviews over the years, although I think it's pretty clear there isn't bad blood because he hasn't left the studio or anything like that. But yes, the film released just recently, and if you look at the critical and audience response, I think you'd say the film is looking to be a success. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has an 85% critical score of 134 reviews, and an audience score of 90% off of 500 plus reviews, so clearly not hitting that top bracket of audience reception that separates the S tier of Pixar films from that solid A tier, but there's nothing wrong with that. However, when you look at the box office, it's telling a completely different and somewhat depressing story. Right from the get-go a couple of weeks ago, I was hearing chatter that there was a good chance that Elio was going to flop. Then the projections started coming in and it was looking very grim. It was looking to make $30 million on its opening weekend, which is not good for a Pixar film at all. Now, after its first day where it made $9 million, including $3 million from Wednesday and Thursday night previews, those projections lowered even further to $20 million. Depressing stuff. And so I think there's a good chance that this one becomes a flop for the ages, unless word of mouth can help it recover in the vein of Elemental, which when adjusted for inflation, had the worst opening of any Pixar film in 2023, with a $29 million opening weekend. Elio doesn't even seem like it's going to make it to that level, but since Elemental was able to salvage things and gross $496 million off a far bigger budget of $200 million, I wouldn't say all hope's lost yet. We'll just have to wait and see. Okay, in the meantime, I've waited, and I've seen, so I'm adding this in now. It ended up having a very, very bad North American release, like was expected. It grossed $21 million, and has a worldwide total of $35 million for its opening weekend. Not exactly what they would have wanted, I think. Before we go any further, I also want to quickly address something that's been bothering me with the Elio discussion. I've seen a lot of people saying that there was zero marketing for the movie and that's why people haven't gone to see it. People blatantly stating that they're Pixar fans and they had no idea the movie was coming out until so conveniently seeing an article where it states that Elio's flopped. This film has the most trailers I've seen for any animated movie, purely from the fact that it was delayed and reworkshopped. There's been numerous trailers, teasers, and fun behind-the-scenes clips on the main Pixar YouTube channel. On top of that, trailers have been playing consistently on TV, but most importantly in cinemas for releases such as Lilo and Stitch and How to Train Your Dragon, and those movies have been getting massive viewership. I just hate this conspiracy theory that original films are somehow being purposely sabotaged because the studios just want sequels and remakes to succeed. Doesn't make any sense. Why would a studio want to lose any money? They're not stupid. In fact, they're greedy to a fault. If they don't have any more original content, then there's only a limited catalogue of what they can continue with sequels if you think that's all that matters. They're not devoid of creativity, but when audiences don't support the original stuff, what else can they do? These people are crying for original content, but when it flops, all they do is point and laugh and scorn. At some point, I think if you actually care, you gotta take some agency and go to see the original movie instead of complaining online for internet points. Also, I have to say that I find it very funny that people are raving about how there's been no advertisement, and yet they have ad blocker on all their devices, and they probably never leave their home, so they don't notice any of the billboards or whatever. All of this does somewhat play into my belief that audiences for animated films, for the most part, they don't give a shit about sci-fi, at least from the big studios. Off the top of my head, I can only really think of two that I'd call a massive success, and those are Lilo and Stitch and WALL-E, which made a lot of money for their day. But then you have the wealth of failures. Atlantis, the Lost Empire. More like Atlantis lost millions of dollars. Treasure Planet. It had a huge budget for its day and bombed very hard, and truly signaled the beginning of the end for Disney's traditional animated era and the pivot towards CGI. Chicken Little did decently, but not as good as they would have liked. Meet the Robinsons stumbled its way above its budget but lost money on hidden costs. Big Hero 6 did very well for itself, but that was because of the superheroes. That was all the rage in the 2010s. I don't think you can chalk that one up as a win for sci-fi. It was hard carried by the heroes. And then there's Strange World, which was one of the most humbling and humiliating box office bombs in living memory for Walt Disney. Might be their biggest failure ever, to tell you the truth. Then you come to Pixar. WALL-E was huge, yes, but then Lightyear is one of their least successful films, and that is some heavy sci-fi, including time travel and alternate realities and whatnot. Then outside of Pixar, recently there was that Transformers movie, flop. Iron Giant, back in the day, top tier film but flopped. Monsters vs. Aliens, Mr. Peabody and Sherman, Home, not hugely memorable films at all. They did okay, and I wouldn't call them flops, but they didn't ascend those lofty heights to superstardom either. You're not going to be seeing sequels to those films. Although I will say recently we had The Wild Robot, which I would consider to be massively successful based on its budget. However, at the same time, it didn't make a huge mark in terms of its memorability and place in pop culture. It's not like WALL-E or Lilo and Stitch. And so I do have to wonder, why do studios keep going back to this sci-fi stuff? Is it because now the people in charge of creative decisions all grew up in the likes of Star Wars' original trilogy and stuff like that? Either way, it's not working, so go back to the drawing board. I recommend a film that features cute talking animals as the lead. They always do well. Regardless, I went to see Elio just the other day, and I thought the movie itself was incredible, and it really does deserve a whole lot more love and success. There are a lot of films that I've seen in the past that I understand why it hasn't done well, and I have no pity towards them. The likes of Lightyear and Strange World come to mind. Elio's not one of those movies. I truly think that based on its quality, it deserves to be a big hit that people go to see. So let's start breaking it down. We're talking about an animated movie, and usually it's easiest to separate things into three major overarching categories: the visuals, the music, and the narrative elements. I guess we can start off with the visuals. As usual, Pixar's produced something that looks truly incredible. Is it any surprise at this point to anybody in the world that Pixar's capable of next level visual quality? I don't think so. When they first released Toy Story, they changed the game and pioneered a style that all the major companies would eventually go and adopt. They crafted the status quo, and they're the ones that continually push the medium forward. Even when they've released middling films in terms of the story elements, they've always knocked it out of the park in terms of the quality. Animation is always fluid, never janky, never rough. Individual hairs, reflections in the eyes, and the puddles of water and whatever. At a certain point, you just have to accept that this is what Pixar does, and they do it better than anybody else in the game. That being said, it was still incredible in so many different ways, specifically if you just focus on the visual design side of things, not even the quality. So many different aliens, and then there's the world they inhabit, and the stars and everything. Oh, the starship when it flies down to Earth, that's pretty incredible. Really just the backdrop of space as well. They captured that wondrous and mysterious feeling so perfectly with the visuals. Man. Go back and watch the stuff they were making 20 years ago, and even compared to then, I feel like the creativity shown here is off the charts. I think my only real critique is that the film frames this as the Space UN, where the leaders of different planets all come to chill and share their knowledge. There's supposed to be only one of each different alien in the facility, and yet when they have these wide shots and group shots, you can see a lot of the aliens have been copy-pasted. I don't even think they bothered with recoloring some of them, just copy-paste, and to me that's lazy. It's very lazy. Then there's the action sequences. What little there were, as it wasn't really that type of movie despite dealing with an invading alien force. It was decent. Nothing spectacular, but some of the spaceflight sequences were cool. There's this one scene where he and his aunt are flying through a debris field. I thought the action there was well put together, really fast-paced and intense. But at the same time, it's not setting itself apart from the pack. Then we come to the sound. The music, nothing to write home about. I don't think it struck me as being particularly memorable. As for the voice acting, that was a lot of fun. Obviously, the film is anchored by the actor for Elio, who I found to be really good, very expressive and sympathetic. The aunt's the same, but to be honest, the standouts for me were 1,000,000% the aliens. Just a kooky bunch of voice performances that had a lot of heart. I especially loved Lord Grygon because Brad Garrett's always going to be a nostalgic favourite of mine, dating back to the glory days of Everybody Loves Raymond, and he's always been great in a voice role. His part in Tangled as the hook-handed man proves that, top tier. Which in turn brings us to the story. Elio tells the story of the eponymous character, Elio Solis, who after the death of both his parents has come to live with his father's sister, who in turn has had to give up her aspirations of becoming an astronaut to raise him. Whilst at a museum shortly after he'd been taken in, he stumbles across an exhibit for Voyager 1, a space probe sent out to explore whether there's life in the universe beyond our own. Feeling alone, this inspires him and makes him fully believe that somewhere out in the stars is a place where he can truly belong. Over the years, this belief turns into an obsession, and he's completely unable to let go of the ideal, becoming more and more cut off from his peers and from his aunt as well. One night, he gets into a fight with two boys, and in the scuffle, he injures his eye and is forced to wear a patch until it heals completely. He then sneaks into a secret meeting at the military base, in which he overhears that there's a discussion of sending out a message to aliens, and so when everybody leaves, he does so, which fries the electricity across the whole base and lands him in a whole heap of trouble at home. Due to their emotional distance and the fact that she feels like nothing else is working, Olga decides to send Elio to a military youth camp with the secret intention of potentially enrolling him there full time. Too bad for him that those bullies from earlier are there, and they gather up a posse on their first night intent on teaching him a lesson. He tries to outrun them and ends up getting caught, but just before they beat his ass, a spacecraft arrives, freezes them in some sort of time pocket, and then abducts Elio. Inside the spaceship, he meets Ooh, a supercomputer in the form of a blob of floating liquid who introduces him to the Communiverse, a flying forum where planetary leaders share ideas and inspiration with one another. In his message to the stars, the aliens have accidentally identified Elio as the leader of Earth, and thus are ready to invite him to apply for membership in the Communiverse. Before Elio's actually able to clarify that he isn't the world leader, things start to spiral out of control rather rapidly. Witnessing the rejection of Lord Grygon by the Communiverse, it seems that Elio's about to be sent home, as Grygon leaves with a declaration that he's going to return with his army to invade and destroy the Communiverse, taking all its knowledge for himself and his people. This in turn leaves Elio desperate, as this is the only place that he feels that he belongs. Thus he volunteers to negotiate with Grygon, with Ooh helping him out by sending home a clone to take his place, and also take that beating that they saved him from earlier, which prompts Olga to bring home clone Elio, thinking that she made a terrible mistake, before noticing that his one day at camp had seemingly changed his entire personality. At first, the movie makes you think that she views this as a good thing, that he's become everything she'd want him to be, only for it to be revealed down the line that she's gone full conspiracy theorist, just like Elio, thinking that Elio has been abducted by aliens and that this boy must be a changeling. She steals one of his hairs to analyze, which leads her to discover the clone, who in turn tries to help her get in contact with Prime Elio. Elio's negotiations with Grygon quickly go badly, and he finds himself imprisoned. During an escape attempt, he stumbles across Glorden, the young son of Lord Grygon, and convinces him to come back with him to the Communiverse so he can be held for ransom and force Grygon to make a deal and leave. Grygon agrees because he loves his son, and decides that the only way to keep him safe is to prematurely lock him in the war armor that all their species wear. Glorden doesn't want this, and doesn't feel like his dad accepts his gentle nature, and so he and Elio scheme to send a goo clone home instead, which very quickly is found out by Grygon, who kills it, mimicking how Olga was easily able to figure out that Elio was not the real one either. This deception makes Grygon go crazy and go back on his deal, as in his eyes, the terms of the deal had been broken anyway. Elio is discovered to not be the leader of Earth, and is kicked out and sent back to his home planet, where he stumbles across Olga and the clone. Together, all three work to get back to the escape pod that Glorden's used to crash land on Earth and escape his father's henchmen, and along the way, the clone kills himself to distract the guards, whilst Olga continues to reveal to Elio that she truly does love and accept him, having learned the language he invented with his parents, Elioese. They use this language to escape the guards and fly away with Glorden, who's dying of hypothermia. Working together with the help of various Earth-based experts and a conspiracy theorist that works with Olga, they escape a debris field and jump into hyperspace, arriving just in the nick of time for Grygon to rip himself out of his power suit and swaddle his son, saving his life. With both parents having proven that they do love and accept their children, they all go back home with the promise to meet again in the stars one day. Honestly, the plot here was secondary. The story is fairly generic by design. This was a character-driven piece, an exploration of feeling misunderstood by a parent and not fitting in with the world around you, thus wanting to go out and find your own place where you belong. It's the interplay between the characters and the dynamics that form that constructs all of the drama and the emotion within the movie. I found it all very moving, to tell you the truth. The movie never really wowed me, but I swear I was constantly hit with these moments of pure, aww. You have this long build of both Elio and Glorden feeling like they're misunderstood, that they don't fit in and their parents would be happier if they weren't around. They don't really want to leave their homes. When Elio sees the clone bonding with Olga, he's upset, but they think it's for the best. Then in the second half of the movie, you just have these constant showings of how much the parents do care, but since the film was solely framed from the child POV at first, you couldn't quite see it. Things like Olga acting just like Elio does and diving into conspiracies based on a single day's worth of personality change. Or secretly learning his made-up language to almost complete fluency. She makes a mistake sending him to boarding school, yes, but she immediately pulls him out and comes to get him the moment something goes wrong, showing that more than anything, she just wants him to be happy. In the end of the movie, she gets to live her dream of going into space, and yet she knows that all of it means nothing if Elio stays behind and leaves her alone on Earth. By the end, you get that realization that Elio does belong with her, and he can finally see it. That she might not be his original family. She's 100% become his mum in every way that matters. Same with Gordon. You see his dad, the war-hungry worm, freak out when his son's in danger, again and again. He immediately recognizes that his son's been cloned, and then he removes his own armor, the ultimate disgrace for their species as the movie says, just to keep him warm and save his life. The movie has so much heart, and is so beautiful. I hope more people actually get to see and recognize that, because it would be a shame to see a film of this caliber go down as Pixar's worst flop of all time. And so yeah, with all that being said, these have been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of Elio if you've seen it? Did you like it? Hate it? If you haven't seen it, would you give it a try? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.